My family scrapped my graduation each year because my sister's dance competition seemed more essential, so I learned early how to clap quietly for myself. I remember the gym bleachers smelling like polished wood and cold popcorn. Lights buzzed overhead, humming like tired insects. I sat there in my gown, cap tilted too far back, name card trembling between my fingers. Mom kept checking her phone. Dad kept drumming his knuckles against the seat. Every time my name echoed through the loudspeaker, they weren't there to hear it. Across town, my sister twirled under glittering lights. They told me later that night, over lukewarm lasagna, that I should understand. Family sacrifices. Big dreams. Priorities. My father's voice was gentle, but his eyes were already somewhere else. On dance schedules, hotel bookings, travel miles, stage rehearsals. I smiled because that's what good sons do. But inside, something thin and brittle cracked. At home, I pinned my empty graduation photos to the wall. No parents, no flowers, no cheers. Just me in a mirror, practicing a smile that didn't touch my eyes. I told myself I didn't need their presence to prove my worth. Still, I saved every tassel in a shoebox like quiet evidence. Years later, the same shoebox sat at the foot of my bed the night my sister called me sobbing. Her competition canceled, her future uncertain, and suddenly she needed me. I stared at those tassels, wondering, was this my moment to disappear, or to finally be seen? Her call came at 2:17 a.m., when the house was nothing but breathing walls and ticking clocks. Rain needled the roof like restless fingers. I sat on the edge of my bed, shoebox open at my feet, tassels coiled inside like faded medals no one had ever awarded me. My sister's voice broke in pieces. A torn ligament. A canceled season. A studio that needed to protect its investment. Mom crying in the background. Dad pacing, asking questions he didn't want answered. I drove without music, windshield streaked with water, streetlights sliding across my face in tired gold lines. Every mile felt like a memory I had already lived. Late nights of them rushing past me, bags slung over shoulders, me waving from the driveway like a polite afterthought. When I reached their house, the living room smelled like tea and grief. My sister sat curled on the couch, ankle wrapped, eyes glassy. Mom grabbed my hands like I was a life raft. Dad hovered near the window, jaw tight, shoulders stiff. They thanked me for coming. I almost laughed. I helped her to the guest room, adjusted pillows, set ice beside her ankle. She whispered that she was scared, of being ordinary, replaceable, forgotten. I saw myself in that fear so clearly it hurt. That night, I slept on the floor beside her bed. At dawn, Mom stood over me with a cup of coffee and said, "You've always been our steady one, Blake." The words felt warm and hollow at the same time. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. It was my company's promotion letter, time-sensitive, life-changing, requiring me to relocate by the end of the week. I looked at my sleeping sister, my anxious parents, and the future tugging at me. For the first time, the choice wasn't about them. And that realization kept me awake long after the sun rose. The morning stretched like thin glass over the house. Light seeped through the blinds in pale slats that cut across the carpet, landing on my sister's wrapped ankle and the trembling of her fingers in sleep. I made coffee in silence. The machine hissed like it was tired of speaking for all of us. In the kitchen, the refrigerator door was still covered with her competition photos, glitter, trophies, mid-air leaps frozen forever. Not a single picture of me hung there. Mom found me leaning against the counter. She spoke softly about doctors, rehab, waiting seasons, not giving up. Her hand rested on my forearm like she needed me to anchor her. I let her, but I felt myself drifting. Dad came in later, tie already loosened, eyes ringed with worry. "You thank me again." Then, without noticing, he asked if I could stick around for a few weeks to help. My phone buzzed in my pocket. The promotion email glowed at me like a quiet alarm. Relocation package, new office, new life, my name written at the top as if it finally mattered. I said nothing. Instead, I walked upstairs and stood in my old room. Dust floated like tiny stars in the beam of the window. On the wall, faint rectangles showed where my graduation photos had once hung before Mom redecorated. I opened the shoebox. Tassels spilled out, red, blue, gold, soft, tangled, ignored. My sister called my name from down the hall. When I reached her doorway, she was watching me with watery gratitude and desperate hope, like I was the last stable thing in her world. She whispered, "You won't leave me, right?" In that moment, I understood something painful and clear. They didn't need me, they needed what I could carry for them. And I didn't know if I could keep carrying it anymore. I told her I would stay for now, but my voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. The house shifted that day. Doors creaked differently. The air felt heavier, like it was holding its breath. I moved through rooms I had grown up in yet never fully belonged to, straightening cushions, washing dishes, carrying bags of ice upstairs to my sister's room. She talked constantly, filling silence with stories about the studio, the coaches, the career she was terrified of losing. I listened, nodding, measuring my own silence and slow heartbeats. Mom watched me from the doorway, eyes soft, relieved, grateful, too grateful. Every time she smiled, it felt like another small weight settling on my shoulders. By afternoon, Dad asked if I could drive to the pharmacy, then the grocery store, then the studio to collect my sister's things. Errands piled up like unspoken expectations. I completed them without complaint, because that's the version of me they knew best. On the drive back, I parked near the river. The water moved in silver ripples beneath a gray sky. I sat there with the engine off, promotion letter open on my phone, my reflection trembling across the screen like I might disappear if I looked too long. I thought about all the graduations they had missed, 3 stages, 3 handshakes, 3 empty rows where my parents should have been. I felt it not as anger but as a quiet erosion. When I returned home, my sister was laughing with Mom in the hallway, already planning her comeback. No one asked if I was okay. That night, as I placed another bag of ice beside her ankle, I realized something unsettling. Being loved here meant being useful, never whole. And in that realization, a small, dangerous calm settled inside me, like the river before a storm. The next day began with noise before light. Pans clattered in the kitchen. Mom's voice floated down the hallway, sharp with stress, then soft with guilt. My sister called my name 3 times before I was fully awake. Once for water, once for pain pills, once simply because silence scared her. I moved like someone walking through a life that wasn't mine. At noon, the physical therapist arrived. The house filled with clinical brightness, the smell of alcohol wipes, rubber bands snapping, calm professional instructions that made everything feel temporary except my presence. I hovered in the doorway, invisible but necessary. When the session ended, Mom squeezed my arm and said, "Thank God you're here." She meant it like a blessing. It landed like a contract. Later, Dad pulled me into the garage. The door rolled down with a metallic sigh, trapping us in the smell of oil and old cardboard boxes. He leaned against the workbench, eyes tired. He told me the truth he'd never said before. Dance had consumed them. Hotels, travel, coaches, scholarships, once-in-a-lifetime chances. He admitted quietly that my milestones had felt smaller beside the spotlight. I waited for an apology that never quite came. Instead, he asked if I could postpone my move, just a little while longer. His voice cracked in a way that almost pulled me back into being the son who saves everything. I looked at my hands, calloused, steady, used to holding other people upright. That night, I returned to my room and pinned a single graduation photo to the wall. Just me, cap crooked, smile unfinished. No family in the frame. I placed the promotion letter beneath it like a mirror. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky, distant and slow. For the first time, I didn't feel torn. I felt ready to choose. And the storm, when it came, would not wash me away. The storm arrived before dawn. Wind rattled the windows like an argument no one wanted to finish. Rain lashed the roof in sharp, impatient beats. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling the house breathe around me, old, familiar, and quietly demanding. At 6:12 a.m., my sister called for me again. I helped her to the bathroom, moved slowly so she wouldn't panic. She leaned on my shoulder, warm and trembling, smelling faintly of lavender lotion and exhaustion. In the mirror, I saw us together, her fragile, me solid, 2 versions of the same childhood shaped in completely different ways. Back in her room, she grabbed my hand. "Don't leave," she whispered. "If you go, everything falls apart." Her fear wasn't manipulation. It was real. But so was mine. Downstairs, Mom was already awake, standing by the window, watching the rain as if it might carry me away. She pressed a mug into my hands without looking at me. Dad hovered in the doorway, silent, heavy with words he couldn't shape. I felt the pull of them like gravity. Then my phone buzzed again. Final confirmation. Flight details. Office address. A life that had waited patiently while I held everyone else together. I walked outside into the rain. Water soaked my hair, ran down my face, pooled at my collar. The driveway shimmered like broken glass. I stood there, letting the storm erase the line between what I owed and who I was. In that moment, I realized something clear and aching. Love didn't have to mean disappearance. When I turned back toward the house, dripping, breath unsteady, I wasn't running. I was arriving at myself. And the door, when I pushed it open, felt heavier than any I'd ever walked through. I didn't speak right away. I stood in the hallway, rain still dripping from my sleeves, a dark line spreading across the rug beneath my feet. The house was quiet in that fragile way that comes after a storm, like everyone was afraid the thunder might return if someone breathed too loudly. Mom reached for a towel without looking at me. Her hands trembled just enough that I noticed. Dad stayed by the staircase, arms crossed, eyes searching my face like he was trying to read a language he'd never learned. My sister watched me from her doorway. She wasn't crying anymore. Her face had shifted into something harder, fear braided with anger, hope stitched to denial. She clutched the blanket around her shoulders as if it were armor. I took a slow breath. I told them about the job, about the flight, about the city that was waiting for me with bright windows and a desk that carried my name. I spoke calmly, but every word felt carved rather than spoken. Mom's shoulders sagged. Dad rubbed his temple. My sister looked at the floor. Then quietly I said the sentence I had practiced in the rain. I'm staying, just not the way you expect. Silence filled the room. I explained that I would help her through the first stage of recovery, but I would not pause my life to keep theirs steady. I would be present, not permanent. Supportive, not sacrificial. Mom blinked hard. Dad finally met my eyes. My sister swallowed and nodded, small but real. That afternoon, I packed only half my suitcase and left the other half in my old room, door open, light on. A promise that I could return without disappearing again. That night, as I sat beside her bed, she whispered, "Thank you, for seeing me and yourself." I watched the moon slide across the wall and felt for the first time both needed and free. And that fragile balance felt like the bravest thing I'd ever chosen. 2 weeks later, I stood in a city that did not know my history, only my name. The new office smelled like fresh paint and coffee beans. Sunlight fell in clean squares across the floor, nothing like the fractured light of my childhood hallway. When my manager shook my hand, he didn't see a caretaker or a spare son. He saw a man who had earned his place. But the real moment came quietly. That morning my phone lit up with a photo. My sister, standing between parallel bars for the first time, ankle-taped, face determined. Behind her, not in the parking lot, not on the phone, but inside the room were Mom and Dad. Sitting together. Watching only her. No schedules. No rushing. No distractions. She texted, "They stayed." Later that week, I flew home for a single night. I walked into the house and found my graduation tassels framed on the wall of the living room, not hidden in a box anymore but chosen, visible, honored. Mom hugged me like she finally understood the difference between loving me and leaning on me. Dad handed me a small envelope, a plane ticket to my own company celebration, booked by them intentionally, proudly. At my sister's next therapy session, she squeezed my hand and said, "You didn't abandon me. You showed me how to stand." That night, driving back to the airport, I realized the justice wasn't in being put first. It was in finally being seen. I left the house lighter than I arrived, carrying family, not carrying guilt. For the first time, my past didn't follow me. It walked beside me.